Hello, playgrounders. Welcome to Sunday Soul Service. Um, Julie and I have been noticing a common question come up, and it's one that we both experienced in our alignment process and still do from time to time, and that's the question of following your inner prompts, how to know what's coming from where, what needs to be paid attention to, what needs to be worked through. And so Julie thought this would be a really good thing to go over for today's Sunday Soul Service. So that's what we're going to talk about. So a couple of concepts before we kind of jump into the meat of it, and this will be a brief video, but I think one concept or principle that Julie and I have both picked up on through the alignment process that is very helpful once you kind of lock it in, and that is that we're all moving along a spectrum, right? There's no binary on-off switch in our consciousness. It's not like, oh, this minute I'm coming totally from ego, and then this minute I'm coming totally from my highest self. It really is a process, on a spectrum. And so maybe on this end of the spectrum, you've got heavily ego driven, and then on this end of the spectrum you've got heavily aligned with and driven by the higher self. And so in the growth process, at some point you kind of reach this tipping point, right, where you kind of reach critical mass. And so you hit that point and you're at, say, 51%, right, operating off of your highest self and off the universe's prompts. But that still means that there's 49% that's still coming from other things, and we'll get over a list in a second of what those other things are. And so that can be a very confusing process, because on one hand you're very much learning to follow the prompts that your highest self and the spirit's giving you, and then on the other hand, from time to time you'll get these cross messages that come in, these impulses that don't quite feel right. You're not exactly sure where they're coming from, and they can really throw you off. So let's look first at kind of where these different prompts come from, because again, we're working off of an ordered system, even though these are more subtle laws that we're still discovering. There still is an organized structure, the same way that the universe has its law of physics. Our spiritual world has a structure and a set of laws that it operates by. And each of our alignment process and our growth process is really about coming to understand what those laws are and how they operate inside our own inner world, because each of our own inner worlds is also very different at times. So let's look real quickly at some of the basic places that prompts come from, whether they're from our highest self or not. So obviously spirit, right off the bat, universe, God, however you want to frame that, is one source of those prompts. And we'll talk a little bit about the differences in a couple of these key ones in just a second. You've also got the ego body, the human, that is another source of these prompts. And usually it's because we have concepts that are embedded in our human consciousness that grab information or grab circumstances that we're in and then interpret it based on those filters, based on those concepts that are encoded in that. And so sometimes we have to unwind that, but sometimes impulses will come from that. The planets themselves, the moon, the astro energies, that's another area where sometimes we can be experiencing something, and once we kind of trace the root down, we realize that we're really just experiencing some energetic shifts from the planets themselves. Collective consciousness. There are things in the collective body sometimes that pass through us that we experience that really aren't ours. They're all of ours, but those can be prompts that we feel or experience sometimes. Someone we're connected to. There may be someone that we have close energetic ties to in the astral realm, and so we can be picking up their energy or something they're going through as well. Someone in our immediate area. Sometimes it can be somebody that we don't have a strong astral connection with, but we're in the same coffee shop as them or the same office, and for some reason we're able to pick up their energy that they're sending off. And then the final thing is misinterpreted body signals. I mean, literally sometimes, and a big part of my kind of growth process was realizing the role that nutrition plays in life as well, not just for powering the body, but I realized that there was this cycle that got created, this loop sometimes, right? So when I was at my worst, I had no control over my human. My thought body, my mind, my human mind ran on its own. couldn't stop it from thinking whatever horrible things it wanted to think, but it was embedded in my emotional system. So what I would experience is my mind body would put out a thought, and then my emotional body, because they were intertwined, would grab that and start issuing the chemicals in my body. So I would actually be having that physical experience as if that thing that I was thinking about was happening, even though it was just a thought. And so it really kind of clued me into the need to be more careful with what I put in my body, because obviously our lower area, our stomach area, our second brain is where we digest our food, but it's also where some of these intuition prompts come from. So I noticed at one point a couple years back, going through a process where I would feel something, and it would be because of something I ate, right? And so I would have some kind of process, uncomfortable process in my stomach from something I ate, but my mind would immediately start to try and identify that based on spiritual things. Oh God, why am I feeling that? Is it because I made so-and-so mad? Is it because I said this to that person, or, whatever it is? And so I had to realize that I had to be very careful with what I was putting in my body, because that could send false signals too that I could interpret sometimes. So really what it comes down to is, how do we know which signals to pay attention to? This is obviously an individual by individual case, right? And this is where the growth process, where alignment gets a little tricky, because we each have our own inner world, and I may be able to get close leveraging psychic gifts or something, but I can't be inside of you necessarily. I can't understand every thought that goes on in your head, every sensation or feeling that comes down. We each have to kind of take these principles and apply them in our own lives and figure out in our own inner world what these different prompts mean. But a couple of basic guidelines. One of the things that was really helpful for me when I would go through this, again, when I was early on in the alignment process, I would notice that I felt fine. Everything in my world was fine. I had accepted and come to terms with any aspects of my world, financially or otherwise, that were wonky at the moment. And then all of a sudden, I would catch myself experiencing this emotional discomfort, whether it was anxiety or panic or sadness. And it would throw me off at first, because, my initial instinct was like, oh God, well, where's that from? Let's find the root. And then I'd start digging around, and I'd realize, okay, well, this isn't coming from anything in my world, really. Like, I have no reason to feel this right now. Nothing has materially changed about my circumstances. I was fine with my circumstances yesterday or an hour ago or whatever it is. So why would I now be having this experience when nothing has changed in my world? So I had to kind of start going through, and it's a lot like if you have kids, when you have babies, when they're in that crying phase where they can't really communicate, you have kind of a checklist that you go through, right? So the baby starts crying, and it's like, okay, is it hungry? No, not hungry. Does it need a diaper change? No, it doesn't need a diaper change. Is it cold? No. And there's kind of a list you go through, and you just kind of run through each one, because you can't have that back and forth at that point. Well, a similar kind of thing works with these prompts that we feel, where you can start going through a list, and obviously the first one is, well, is this a prompt coming from spirit? Now, the prompts coming from spirit are very direct and distinct. Spirit is never going to send you a message or something that's meant solely to cause fear. That's something we create inside our own humans, right? So the first thing you can look at is how's the message coming through. If the message has any kind of form to it, then most likely it's coming from your human or ego. And what I mean by form is, the ego body is spirit. When we're in the immediate, when we're in a mindful space, right, and we're centered and we're connected to our spirit, we are just being. We just are. Right? And we may take action within that state, but we just are. We're not, anything we're doing, I want to draw right now. Why? Because I want to draw. Because I want to do that experience. Ego is all about filling out a form, right? So I want to draw right now. Why? Because it would be so awesome if I drew this amazing painting, and then people looked at it and thought, man, you're so amazing with your talent. That's ego. So anytime the message or prompt is trying to fill out a form, you need to do this because you won't be this kind of person if you don't, or because this person won't like you if you don't. That's highly likely coming from ego. If it's a very simple, direct message, it's very likely coming from spirit. You need to not go on that flight. Why? You just need to not go on that flight. Okay? So that's something where, if there's not a story to it, it's much more likely that it's coming from spirit. If there's a story to it, if there's something trying to convince you to be a certain way, most likely it's coming from ego body. Now, if you go through those things and you find it's not spirit, it's not ego, well, then you can start kind of ticking down the list. And you're not always going to find a definitive answer. There's a lot of times where I've had to just say, okay, well, I know that there's nothing that needs to be rectified. I know that there's nothing inside of me that I need to fix, so I'll just chalk it up to one of the unknowns. Maybe it's astral energy, maybe it's picking something up from the collective, maybe it's somebody in my world. And obviously, if there's a specific flavor to it, if it's oh man, I'm feeling like fear over somebody's health or somebody being sick, maybe it's somebody in your world that you're connected to. But you can go through those and try and figure out, okay, is it coming from one of these areas? And if it's not, then at the end of the day, sometimes you just don't act on it. If you can't figure out where it's coming from and can't really identify the specifics of it, then feel comfortable sitting back and telling spirit, okay, I'm not sure what this prompt is, and I'm not going to go off half-cocked and start operating based on something that could be a reflection of my ego or my human or somebody else in my vicinity. So I'm going to trust you, universe. I'm not trying to ignore this thing or bypass it. I just don't know where it's from. So if there's more information you want to send me, if this is coming from you, then go ahead and do that. And that's a real huge kind of catch-all, is being aware that everything in manifestation runs off our intentions and our expectations. So if your intention is to do a good thing, if your intention is to really face down whatever it is and learn from it, then you got to trust that the universe is going to give you additional prompts if that's what's needed, as long as you're not running from that thing. So wanted to keep the video short today. I hope that's helpful, but just a couple things on kind of how to identify those inner prompts and how to know what to do with them, or whether anything needs to be done at all with them. Hope that's helpful, and we can always jump in the comments if there's more. Are you wanting to say hi?
Hi! That's it!
That's all, folks.